Okay, so today I'm really excited to see what we discover in the periodicals today because last week you'll recall we did 2 weeks and it was almost as if the publishers and editors were amping up and increasing the frequency of references to what was happening in the novel as the tension in the mystery novel Lady Audley's Secret amped up itself. It was really, really cool because for the first few weeks, we'd seen some references, but they were a little bit oblique, a little bit tangential, articles about railway travel in a book that will ultimately have something to do with railway travel. But last week, there was an article about red herrings. It was about the actual fish, but it was kind of like this wink and a nod from the publisher, because in a mystery where you would have had red herrings, and as a reader, you're wondering what the red herrings are in Lady Audley's Secret, then all of a sudden they post this article about red herring fish in England. There was also an article about how good people take up the burden of moral dilemmas as we see Robert Audley coming into his own as a character and accepting moral burden that he'd really rather not encounter because he is described as sort of a lazy, take it easy sort of guy. So I'm super excited to see what we find today. It's been my custom to just review this as I go live. So I'm just taking stock really quick of the events in the novel. The other thing I had noticed as we got to the last couple of weeks is that the magazine was amping up the amount of prose that it had. Whereas previously, when it started publishing Lady Audley's Secret, it was heavily invested in publishing fiction. By the time we're midway through this book, Lady Audley's Secret, and its publication in the novel, I started noticing more and more nonfiction being added into the mix rather than primarily fiction. So let's see. We have, as I said, Robert Audley is deciding to take up the burden of this ethical dilemma he finds himself in the midst of, and he goes and retrieves George Talboys' little son from his grandfather's home and gets him into like a proper home. He's kind of neglected with his grandfather. So we see Robert Audley coming into his own through that act. The next chapter is him going to George Talboys' father's house to see if his father cares that George is missing. Because he's told himself, if his father doesn't care, then I feel absolved because I'm not even that closely related to him. And yet he goes to the father's house, realizes that the father has disowned him long ago and does not care. And let's see, hold on one second. I'm trying to decide what happens at the end. Has he gone there yet? Yeah, okay. He's going to visit him. He has not gone there yet. So we see him coming into his own, and we also see this generational strain, right? First, Robert goes to the son. He takes care of that, wraps up that ethical dilemma, which he's clearly accepted responsibility for. And now he's going to the father of George. So we've done the son, now the father. And he's going to the father to determine if he feels like Robert, is obligated to keep sussing out this mystery. So we see him like taking some of the burden, some of the responsibility, but still towing the line and wanting to be let off the hook, as it were. So that's all that happens in this section. I see a long article that's pretty related, but I'm just going to skim the rest and see. Oh, I've also noticed that they are moving Lady Audley's Secret further and further to the front of the issue, where it had been sort of by the end. It's now almost the second thing you see in the whole newspaper. That's really interesting. In fact, it's the very second thing. So we just have fiction up front. And then right after Lady Audley's Secret, we have, now at this point, they have 2 long articles that they're doing. At the beginning of the publication of Lady Audley's Secret in the London Journal, there was only 1 long article each time. But this time, they've upped it to 2. And one of the long articles is called Dwellings for the Working Classes. Why would this be relevant and on the reader's mind? Because this whole drama in Lady Audley's Secret came because George Talboys married Helen Malden, and they were very, very poor. So he leaves and goes to try to get money while his family lives in squalor. And he comes back and he can't find them. And we know that Robert has just rescued George Talboys' son from continued existence in that life and has put him out of the home of the working class. And we get lots of descriptions of how kind of unsavory their living situation is, the home specifically that Helen, George Talboys, and their son and the father-in-law would have been living in. So let's see. It is now somewhat more than a year ago that George Peabody, an American merchant of the highest position in the city of London, performed a work which will forever place his name among the chief benefactors of the capital. He gave the munificent sum of £150,000 to ameliorate the condition of the poor and needy of this great metropolis and to promote their comfort and happiness. He did this to testify to his goodwill to the country where he had lived, surrounded during a lengthened residence by many friends. Previous to devoting such a large portion of his wealth to the purposes of charity, he had distinguished himself in general society by the kindness and geniality of his disposition. The sum he placed in the hands of a committee consisting of Mr. Adams, the United States Minister, Lord Stanley, Sir James Emerson, it's just like a bunch of names. Mr. Peabody attached but one condition of importance to his gift, that now and for all time there should be a rigid exclusion from the management of this fund of any influences calculated to impart to it a character either sectarian as regards to religion or exclusive in relationship to local or party politics. So what he means by that is it can't be attached to any religious requirements that would be like one denomination or any political thing. So he's basically, the only requirement is that it's totally egalitarian. Without in the remotest degree desiring to limit the discretion of the committee in the selection of the most suitable means of giving effect to his objects, he threw out for their consideration whether it might not be found conducive to ameliorating the condition and augmenting the comforts of the poor, who either by birth or established residence form a recognized portion of the population of London, to apply the fund or a portion of it in the construction of such improved dwellings for the poor as may combine in the utmost possible degree the essentials of healthfulness, comfort, social enjoyment, and economy. That is one sentence. And people ask me why I write long sentences. It's because I spend my days reading Victorian writing, which, like, that's a whole paragraph. That's one sentence. Let's see. The idea of Mr. Peabody's is not new. Doubtless all our readers know that practical experiments in the way of providing comfortable and commodious dwellings for working men in the metropolis have been brought under public notice by many well-known philanthropists who have for years devoted much of their time and money with that view, believing that the domestic condition of the poor in great cities lies at the very root of all attempts to raise them in scale of morals and intellect. I'm going to skip some and see if they talk about what these look like. He first of all secured for the purpose a lease for 99 years of a large plot of ground in Mark Street, Finsbury, and having demolished a lot of wretched dwellings which had encumbered the ground, he erected on part of the site so cleared the first block consisting of 20 houses for so many families, so 20 families. A market feature in the design of this building is that each of the 20 houses contains within itself every kind of domestic office and convenience. The tenants, in fact, have nothing in common but a winding staircase. That means they're not like sharing bathrooms and things like that, which is a big deal at that time. They share nothing but a staircase leading from the ground to their several houses and to a fine, flat, commodious roof for purposes of recreation, the drying of clothes and the like. To each tier or flat of the central compartment, there is a pretty balcony in front, which gives to the whole structure a picturesque appearance. And it says the rent of the houses is 5 shillings or 6 shillings a week. The whole exterior is built of the finest brick, but by the use of artificial stone in the interior, the cost of the whole structure was reduced by at least 25%. This new material is extremely hard, durable, and light. It goes on about some of the more construction. Then they talk about how they're asking for the rent because a lot of people who are impoverished don't want to take charity. So they talk about how they've calculated the rent in a particular way. They have an engraving of it. I'm not sure if I can get that to show up. This is what it would have looked like. Oh yeah, you can see that pretty well, which is pretty nice looking. Okay, so that's that article, and they've definitely spent the bulk of their big long articles on talking about these new constructions of dwellings for those who need subsidized housing. And they're doing that because that has been the thing that started the conflict in this novel. And we've just returned and seen that and ushered the last resident that will be important to the story, George Talboys' son, out of it. And so I think they're foreseeing that their audience would have been questioning or like thinking about what that would have looked like for real people. Okay, then we have another novel. Looking at the science section, not too much there. Then they have their joke section, which I don't find to usually be very relevant. Okay. Statistics, there's immigration and Irish ports. Might be relevant because of how George immigrated and then emigrated. Labor and trials. God has laid upon us many severe trials in this world, but he has created labor for us and all is compensated. Thanks to labor, the bitterest tears are dried. A serious consoler, it always promises less than it bestows. A pleasure unparalleled, it is still the salt of other pleasures. Everything abandons you. Gaiety, wit, love, labor alone is always present, and the profound enjoyment it produces. Have I said enough? No, for to these privileges of labor we must add a greater yet, that it is like the sun. God has made it for the whole world. I could see that as a reference possibly to what the Victorians would have called, I wouldn't call it this, but the Victorians would have called it the undeserving poor, people who didn't want to work for their money. They always kind of talked about that. Ooh, okay, this is a good one. I'm so sad. We had a few viewers before and people are gone, but household tips. To extinguish a fire, a solution of 5 ounces of muriate of ammonia in 1 gallon of water will easily extinguish a large fire. I'm not going to tell you why that's relevant, but it is. And they're being really tricksy about it by putting it in there before it's relevant. The course of true love. A curious case which has occurred shows the course of true love does not always run smooth. The hero of the story's name is omitted for fear of hurting the gentleman's feelings. He was formerly in the army and then went into the cheese line, after which he went off to Belgium at the head of a comfortable sum. In the Belgian capital, he fell in with a fair widow in easy circumstances. He proposed, was accepted, and they were married. Before the ceremony, however, the lady, with commendable delicacy, informed her lover that she had lost one eye, that only one of those bright orbs had fascinated him, and the other was glass, he suggested. Nay, retorted the fair spousa, it is a real diamond. I take it off every night. The bridegroom-elect expressed himself perfectly satisfied and vowed that nothing could diminish the favor of his attachment. On the very night of the wedding, the husband furtively rose and made off with his better half's diamond eye. He sold it to a jeweler in Paris for 300 francs, far below its value. And this little transaction led to his detection and arrest. The diamond eye is impounded, and its fair owner has not as yet claimed it. Okay, so we have crime, a fugitive being caught. So we have all the mysterious elements, and they're wrapped up with love, which is what's going on with George Talboys and his missing wife. And there might be a new love interest on the horizon that they're also teasing at. So there you have today's parallels and references to the story, which I think are just getting more and more like, they're getting clever and kind of like tongue-in-cheek with it, which I think is really fun. So as you keep reading, if you're reading Lady Albie's Secret along with us, you'll see even more how these things are related. Oh, here's one more I'll leave you with. Knowledge. Every increase of knowledge may possibly render depravity more depraved, as well as it may increase the strength of virtue. It is in itself only power, and its value depends on its application. That is like more and more the inner monologue of Robert Audley. That's what you're going to be seeing. He's questioning, like, am I using this knowledge that I have, even resolving this mystery? Is it helping or hurting people? And he keeps questioning that. Even as he's like, either way, I wish I wasn't dealing with it. All right, guys. Thanks for being with us today. Bye.